Welcome to the Research Capacity Development Unit at the University of Johannesburg Postgraduate School. My name is Kweketso Pila and I will be your moderator today. Please allow me to start off by thanking all our attendees for taking the time to join us. And most importantly, we would like to thank our presenter, Prof. Beatrice Simo-Kingney, for her effort with preparing and giving this presentation. Before I officially introduce Prof. Beatrice to you, I would like to go over some housekeeping rules and some important information. And so for the housekeeping rules, if you do have questions during the presentation, please raise your hand if you would like to speak or type your question into the chat box. I will then indicate to the presenter to address your question. The recording link for the session and the presentation slides will be uploaded on the Moodle community by the end of the week. And also, a feedback survey will be sent during the session on the chat box. May we please request that you fill the survey out for us to gain some insight on whether this workshop was useful and how we can improve in the future. So without wasting any more time, I would like to introduce the facilitator to you, Prof. Beatrice, by reading out her bio. So Prof. Beatrice Simo-Kingney is a professor in the School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa, and she serves as visiting scholar in African tertiary institutions. Faculty member of the College of Business and Economics, she has been involved in postgraduate research administration for the past 8 years. She holds a PhD in economics with a specialization in applied econometrics. Her research interests lie in the field of sustainable development, including but not limited to housing, asset prices, agriculture, environment, performance evaluation, risk management, gender, and health. She is an alumna of the World Academy of Sciences, DFG, affiliate of the African Academy of Sciences, and has served as mentor for the DAAD Climate Africa program, member of the Climate Change and Agriculture and Rural Development Working Group. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to our facilitator, Prof. Beatrice. Over to you, Prof.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm not sure if you can view my screen.
It keeps moving. We were seeing the slides, but now, okay, yes, we see the slides, but they are not on presentation mode as yet. Yes, perfect. They are now.
Okay, great. So once again, thank you for having me. So today we will have a short discussion about the thesis format and the submission procedure. I know it's a very important topic, and then sometimes students get, really frustrated when they don't know what to do and how to present their thesis. Fortunately, the postgraduate school has thought of this, and it's good that we address this challenge. So the outline of the presentation is as follows. We need to start from understanding what is expected in a thesis, the difference between a monograph and a paper or article-based thesis. We will touch on the submission requirement. And because we're talking about the submission, there is a possibility of resubmission, and we will also browse through that, and we will close by a short introduction on the thesis defense, now that the CBE has switched to the dual mode of PhD. Before we had only, the written dissertation, but this year we have started with the PhD defense as well. So because of that, I will touch a little bit on the PhD defense. So what is expected in the thesis? Let's start from the definition of the thesis. If you go through a dictionary, then you will see that the thesis is basically a statement, right? But a statement that needs to be proved. So when it comes to the master or doctoral thesis, the written version of it, which is called dissertation, involve personal research written by a candidate for a university degree. So if you are doing your master bioresearch, then the purpose is to achieve something, be awarded a university degree. And the same applies to the doctoral thesis. Perhaps I need to, emphasize that the discussion that we will be having today does not apply to coursework master. Why? Because at the end of the coursework master, what you usually issued in terms of the research report is just the mini dissertation. But the discussion that applies here is for full dissertation, or also known as master bioresearch, right? So the master or the PhD or the doctoral thesis will be, defined as a contention or principle of which the candidate would like to convince the reader. And there will be then two versions of the PhD, as I explained earlier, then the written presentation called your dissertation, and the oral presentation called defense. Are you able to view everything? Because it seems like the
Yes,
chat.
we can see the presentation.
So the last line, oral presentation, you are able to view as well.
No, we cannot see the last sentence.
Okay, I don't know how to make this. Just I'm just trying to go to the taskbar setting just to see if we can shift it. I'll put it to the right. Yeah, let's see. I think it's much better now.
Yes, much better. We can see everything.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's start from the duration. At the University of Johannesburg, we have a policy on the duration for each of these degrees. The master's has a minimum term of 1 year, 12 months, and a maximum of 2 years for the full-time study. Remember, there is a provision to do your study as full-time or part-time. So when you are doing it full-time, the minimum that you would be expected to stay in the system, minimum period will be 12 months for the master's and 24 months for the doctoral. And the maximum will be the 24 months for the master and 48 months for the doctoral. But as a part-time, the minimum time is still the same, but the maximum is 1 year more. So you have 36 months maximum period for part-time masters and 60 months maximum period for part-time doctoral study. Obviously, there are also provision to have some form of break depending on the circumstances, because sometimes there are unforeseen circumstances that might stop you from completing your work on time. But whatever the case might be, it is always important to follow the rules and apply to those breaks so that they are taken into account when they compute your time in the system. Right. Now, jumping straight to the structure of the thesis, the basic structure of the thesis, when I'm talking about the structure, I'm talking about, the content. What do you want to see in the thesis, or how do you actually demonstrate your statement? We have said that dissertation is a statement that needs to be proved. Then how do you go about that proof? The full document that you have to submit to hand in at the end of your research must have, or it's expected to have these sessions, the abstract, which is the summary of everything that you have in your document. You need to start off from the introduction, which lay out the problem, the general problem that you have. You also are expected to give some form of background. Remember, thesis is a scientific document. Because it is a scientific document, you ought to rely on the existing. And that exiting is usually, developed in the background or literature review. And it shows exactly how your study fit in that body of work. Then you also have content chapters. So apart from the introduction, background, and the conclusion, you have some chapters. And those chapters usually help to understand how you get to prove your point and to discuss the finding as well. Then later on, you have your conclusion and the recommendation, followed by the future work. Obviously, because it's a scientific document and you acknowledge you've used material that come from other people whom you may have or you must acknowledge throughout your development, then you have the reference, list of references. There are also some information that, might not be relevant to display in the content of your study, but which can be consulted by the reader if needed. And those type of information, you put them in the appendix. But then how to structure all this information, if this one is the content, the way to put all this information together will depend on the specific format. So we need to see how the decision about the format is made, how many types of format exist, what are the benefits and disadvantages of each format. So let's start from the format of dissertation. There are two main formats of dissertation, the so-called monograph, also called a sandwich dissertation, and then you have the paper-based dissertation. It is also known as article-based dissertation or cumulative dissertation. So all those three refer to the same thing. But then, why those two format are the well-known one? The practice in the CBE is to follow quite of a mixture of the two. That is why it is not, recognized as a specific form, but is a merging of the two. It is called mixed format dissertation. Now, before we get into the detail about each of them, let's find out which one is common or what drives the choice of the thesis format. The thesis format will depend on the research area. Article-based thesis is quite common in natural sciences, life sciences, medical sciences, engineering, and quantitative social science than in the humanities. So you will see that in the humanities, people will tend to go for monograph. But in most of the other fields that I've listed, some of which I've listed, they will actually favor the article-based dissertation. It will also depend on the country and the university. So different countries and different universities have different preferences, but there is an increasing shift from monograph to paper-based thesis. And finally, the tab will also depend on the candidate. Sometimes you start off your journey thinking that you would, submit a monograph, later on to discover that it is not possible, and then you switch to a different form. So all those are the three main, reason or argument that inform the choice of your thesis format. Now, decide what to submit. As we have said, the decision are based on the university, the countries, the student. But then all this need to be aligned to the university regulation. Remember, the university regulation are the framework within which students operate. So for each university and depending on the faculty and even the school where the student is registered, you need to ought to follow the choice that has been made. So in some country, this is also subject to ministerial orders, to governmental acts, or to ruling. Now, what about UJ? UJ allows both thesis formats, monograph and article-based dissertation. And because CBE is aligned or should align or must align, his standard operating procedure to the UJ policy. They also allow, both type of thesis format. Now, let's get into each of them, starting from the monograph dissertation. The key feature of the monograph dissertations are four of them. We will discuss four of them. The end product. What do you hang in it? If you decide to go monograph dissertation way, then at the end, you need to submit a comprehensive research report. Okay, so comprehensive research report, as we will see later on, is the full document, is like a book. That is the book you want to submit. The authorship of that book is the student only. So student is the sole author in the monograph dissertation. The language, the monograph might be written in the national language. There might be an option to choose when there are different national languages. In South Africa, for instance, we have many languages. So it is not surprising to see that for the monograph, you will see some people will use one of the languages of the university, one of the instruction languages of the university, right? Now, the length, most monographs will range between 150 pages to 250 pages. But I think there has been, quite an advert on someone who submitted 1,050 pages or 1,500 pages monograph from the field of geography. And that person seems to be a professor from the Netherlands university. So just to tell you that with the monograph, you can have as many pages as possible, but you will see that this one is relatively shorter when it comes to the paper-based thesis. Now, the structure of the monograph. In the monograph, you basically have to start from the introduction chapter. Obviously, in all types of thesis, the starting point is all about the introduction chapter, and then you also have the final chapter, which is your concluding chapter. But in between, you have different chapters, 1, 2, 3, the minimum usually is 3, but you can have more than that. In the first chapter, usually you have your background, the literature review, where you actually indicate how your study fit in the body of language, the field, the research area where you want to write your thesis or your dissertation on. Then the chapter could be the conceptual framework, or usually it is the conceptual framework. The conceptual framework is where you develop your research hypothesis and then build from the existing theory that substantiate what you want to prove. And the third chapter usually refers to the material and method. In social science, most of the time you have two broad methods of analysis. You have the qualitative, you have the quantitative, and you can also have the mix. So your material and method ought to be developed somewhere and in one of the chapter. And one of the chapter, another chapter needs to discuss your results and compare and the comparison with the existing finding. That is your chapter 4. Apart from those 4 chapters, you can have more, but this is the minimum that you can expect from the monograph. So what comes out from this is that in the monograph, the literature review must be concentrated in one chapter. The material and method must also be found in one single chapter. And so will be for the rest of the discussion. Your results found in one chapter, your conceptual framework found in one chapter. And so that is the book, your monograph dissertation. Now, what are the benefits of the monograph dissertation? The advantage is about the flexibility that you have. When you go for the monograph dissertation, you have the freedom in the way you write. Decide rather freely on the layout and how to include, photograph tables, figure, and data. You will see this is not the case for the paper, because for the paper, you have an extra requirement that need to be met. Those requirements come from the journal that will publish your work. But for the monograph, you don't see this. You are free to decide how to lay out your work. You are not dependent on any external factor like the editorial or peer review process. Why? Because for the monograph, as you will see later on, the requirement at the end will be that you extract articles from your monograph, publishable article, and those articles need not to be published. And because they need not to be published, it means that you don't expect anything from the journal editors or the peer review process. With the monograph also, there is a freedom with the timeline in which you write your dissertation. It is you who makes the decision. But then when it comes to the paper base, as you will see, there is no such. Remember that you have a maximum timeline to remain in the system. And during that time, you need to coordinate between your own, timelines and the timelines of the journal editor. That is free from the monograph. And that is the use advantage that you have when you go for monograph. But then the problem with the monograph is that it is difficult to read in comparison to the papers. And this has an implication. It delays the assessment period. When you submit a book that is big enough, then the examiner can take more time to come back with the feedback. And that is a problem. Monographs are also lowly disseminated, if not published as a book, because the assumption is that after your dissertation, you can publish as a book, but how many people go through the publication? So at best, it will be only, it will rest in the repository of the library of the university where the student has graduated. So internationally, there is no access. People are restricted from getting your knowledge. Then the article requirement make it also difficult for this process. When you write a monograph, at the end, before you graduate, you need to submit a minimum number of manuscripts. When it comes to the CBE, this number is 2. You need at least 2 manuscripts from your monograph before graduation. So this is another way. So completing a book before extracting the paper, it's sometimes very difficult. Now, if you don't want to go through all those disadvantages, you have an option. The option is the paper-based dissertation. For the paper-based dissertation, the features are quite different. The end product is now a compilation of international peer-reviewed journal papers, which must be related to the all-inclusive thesis topic. And the number will vary depending on the faculty or the university requirement. The number, ranges between 2 and 5. But when it comes to UJ, this one, it's, depends on the faculty. For instance, in CBE, we have minimum of 2, but in the School of Economics, for instance, we expect 3. So which means that the requirement will depend on the school where the student is registered, not only the faculty, but mainly the school. Often, however, there is a crucial detail. Not all your paper have to be accepted or published by the time you submit your thesis. The regulation says that a minimum of them need to be at least accepted for publication. And that is what that minimum I was talking about. For CBE, you expect a minimum of 2. be accepted or published. And what is more is that they gives you the ranking of the journal where those publications need to appear. So if you go for paper-based dissertation, you must be careful where you send your publication to. If you don't meet this requirement, it means that you have wasted your paper. And consequence, you need to redo the paper because those one will not be accepted for your dissertation. Now, what is SCAMG, Simango? Call it Simango, is a research network from several, Spanish and Latin America academic institutions. And those one, they help to categorize journals based on some form of performance criteria, right? And then you have first quintile Q1, second quintile Q2, and so on and so forth, up to 4. I think they have got 4 quintile. But for the CBE, if you go for article-based dissertations, the expectation will be for you to have at least 2 papers accepted or published in at least a Q2, journal before you graduate. So the Q1 is the top, and Q2 is the second top, second best. Then you have Q3, and then you have Q4. So Q4, in terms of quality, is the low quality when it comes to Simago ranking, right? And this is what you ought to know when you follow this setup. Now, the authorship for the article-based dissertation, unfortunately, the student is not the only author because the paper are accepted, are expected to be co-author, although they don't have to be, right? So you can have single author publication, or you can also have co-author publication under this setup. An important detail to watch out for is that there can be, some form of regulation on the authorship. For instance, there are some institutions where you will be expected to be at least the first author of a paper before that paper is accepted as part of your thesis. So you need to pay attention to that. Although there is no written kind of policy when it comes to the CBE on the authorship, but the expectation is that students need to have contributed more, at least 50% in that paper for it to be part of his or her thesis. Okay, so this is the practice in the CBE. You normally have to declare the exact contribution each author will have made in a paper. This one prevents people to go and team up with well-experienced researcher to have publication and claim the publication to be part of their thesis. It is not allowed. So there must be an exact contribution, and that contribution needs to be approved by each of the author. So that is what we usually recommend in the CBE. I must acknowledge that this requirement, or the requirement to have the paper published in the Q2, is quite a strong one, so that it is usually difficult for many students in the CBE to go for article-based dissertation. However, we will see how they navigate through. This will come later. In terms of the language, for the article-based dissertation, it is possible to have articles that are published in a language that is different from the language of instruction of the university. But you are required to have the translated version in your thesis. So let's say, for instance, that you publish your paper in Portuguese, for instance. Well, it is a publication if it's accredited, if it's a part of the Q2 journal. But then for it to be part of your thesis, you have to translate that article into English before you put in your thesis. The length, apart from the papers, you have got to write a banding test. Remember, when it comes to the length, it is really not straightforward as in the monograph, because everything depends on the number of paper you decided to write with your supervisor. It's from 2 to 5, and some supervisor would request 3, 4, and 5, and depending on the length of the paper, then the most you can say it about this one is what they call banding test. So for the paper, you can have as many paper as you want between that range, 2 to 5. In the School of Economics, the minimum is 3. In other departments, you will see that the minimum could be 2 papers. So it is discipline-based when it comes to the number of paper. However, going for this type of dissertation requires the candidate to have what is called the banding test. And the banding test will range between 30 and 50 pages. What is the banding test? The banding test actually is made up of the first chapter and the last chapter. So the first chapter, it is a substantial introduction that helps to, explain how people are related together. Why the conclusion will summarize everything that you have, found in single or standalone papers. So it is very important to understand that your introduction, when you go for article-based dissertation, it's quite different from the introduction of a monograph, because the goal in the article-based dissertation introduction is actually to show how related the topics are. So don't get me wrong. Article-based dissertation does not mean that you pull papers, you have different paper or different topics in a document and call it your dissertation, but they must be connected to a single topic. If they are not connected to a single thesis, then it is not a dissertation, right? So be careful how you choose the topic when you are writing an article-based dissertation. Hence, for the structure, you have something like this. The first one is the introduction. This is where you connect these essays together. So the papers are actually essays or stand-alone studies. And you can have up to 5, as I indicated earlier. And now you have the final one, which is the conclusion. The conclusion is just like the summary of all the conclusions from your single papers. Now, for each paper, what is key in the paper-based dissertation is that each paper has his own introduction, his own literature review, his own methodology, method or material, his own result and discussion session, as well as the conclusion. Unlike the monograph dissertation where, introduction, literature review is expected in one chapter, the methodology is expected in one chapter, you clearly see that paper-based dissertation allows you to spread your literature review throughout your paper. So each chapter or paper, because now the chapters are papers, so each paper has its own literature review. In the same way, you spread your methodology across your paper. So one paper can use one methodology, another paper uses a different methodology. That is not expected in a monograph, because in a monograph, you have a full a chapter that speaks to the methodology, which obviously might be one or many of them, but they are found in one single chapter, which is not the case for paper-based dissertation. Now, what are the benefits of a paper-based dissertation? The paper-based dissertation, scholars claim it to be easy to read, and it shortens then the assessment period because they are short. It also helps, with the logic, because in the monograph, every time after reading the whole book, the assessor has to recall what was the research question and find out link it together with a short answer. And remember, in a research dissertation, you have the main research question, and then you have sub-research question, and all of them are answered, in one place. But when you have paper-based dissertation, everything is happening as if you have sub-questions that are answered, in specific, in stand-alone paper. And this make the logic easy to be understood by the external assessor, and it helps them to reduce the so-called subjective bias. In the paper-based dissertation, because your work is peer-reviewed, as part of the process, you need to deliver accepted papers or published paper. Then you gain some sort of free review, free comment from peer reviewer, which can help you to improve your quality of your work. And so doing, the external peer review process is therefore considered as a quality label regarding your scholarly work. The assessment committee also, which is your examination board, also perceive this process as a bonus, because if a main body of the scholarly work of your dissertation was already accepted by an international peer review journal in your field, it gives them some form of quality assurance, right? So this is, it make your work more credible. Then with 2 or 3 published paper or accepted publication from your thesis, then you reduce the risk of failing your work. So it would be less likely for an assessor to fail a dissertation where at least 2 chapters have been accepted for publication or published by accredited journal. So this actually raised the question on which type of outlet will you send your paper to. You need to be careful of predatory journal in that case. The problem now that you have with the paper-based dissertation is that, well, there is a critique that having a compilation of paper called thesis take the cream off your research. It's like, it doesn't, because it's no longer a book. People feel like the whole argument that you have to demonstrate is broken down. It doesn't flow nicely. That is the critics. There is also a heavy dependence on the decision and deadline of journal and editor. Remember, you only have 4 years. And out of maximum 4 years for the PhD, I take the example of the PhD, and during that time, you ought to make sure that you have submitted the paper, go through the review process, and get it accepted. There are some fields where the review process really does not take long. So in a couple of months, when you submit your paper, you are able to get the feedback. But in other disciplines, it is not the case. For instance, in economics, you can have up to 3 years turnaround time for some journal. And imagine you have submitted your PhD paper in this type of journal, then you wait forever. It would delay you unnecessarily. So you need to be careful which journal to select when you decide to go for paper-based dissertation. So this process is also tricky because of a risk of 1 or more papers being rejected. If you have many papers that are rejected, basically you will struggle to have to meet the requirement for your to meet the submission requirement, and as such you will be delayed. There's also a difficult balance between the tight completion deadline, as I indicated earlier, and the rather slow peer review process when it comes to some journals. Not all the journals are really slow in terms of the peer review process, but some of them. Hence, cautious which journal to choose. Because students have no control over the process, it is important to plan carefully and make the decision earlier to avoid trouble. So don't start your minor dissertation. After 2 years, you say, oh, I'm going to paper-based dissertation. Well, because it's quite tricky. chances are that you might complete all the papers on time having the manuscript, but not publish. And if they are not published, then you won't be able to submit. So you must be careful. Now, given those, limitation for the monograph as well as the paper-based article, the general practice when it comes to CBE and particularly School of Economics is to go for a mixed format dissertation. And the key feature is that this type of dissertation usually, they are registered as a monograph. But then chapters are prepared as standalone papers, which are submitted for publications as soon as they are complete. And this helps you to save the time to meet the requirement of the article requirement when you complete. And this type of format combines the advantage of monograph and is also combined the paper-based thesis, while they mitigate the disadvantage of each of the two. Well, for the monograph, while you have chapters, the content of that chapters, because you are the one who decide, you have that freedom, that flexibility in setting out the layout of your thesis. So you can have the chapter set up as single paper. And we found this format quite convenient. It is convenient because you are not compelled to extract the article from the monograph once you have completed. It is simple. It is also simple because you are able to produce your paper as you write your dissertation. And this will have many advantages that we will cover later. So for this type of format, the mixed format dissertation, usually, the structure, the general structure is the same. You have an introduction chapter or introductory chapter. You have the conclusion chapter. In between, you don't have papers. Be careful. Now you have chapters. But those chapters are slightly an extended version of your papers. You need to figure out the difference between this and the paper base. In the paper base, the papers appear exactly the way they are published in the journal. But in the mixed format dissertation structure, then you don't have those papers as chapter. You have chapters rather, but no matter what was the requirement of the journal for publication, you don't follow that. Then you get only the content and sometimes an extended version. Remember, some papers are short because of the requirement of the journal. You might be compelled to cut down a lot of things, but those details are needed in your manner dissertation. Hence, there is a difference between chapter and papers. And the chapter ought to be followed. The chapter format ought to be followed when it's not paper-based. So the cut and paste or copy and paste paper in the manner dissertation, in the thesis must only applies when you are registered or when you have registered your thesis as a article-based dissertation. Otherwise, you are expected to provide chapters. And when you have chapters, be careful not to take the paper exactly the way they are published to paste there. No, you need to have a consistent formatting throughout, and those papers need not to be pasted there. They must be converted into chapters. And then we will see later on how to do that. Now, in each chapter, when you have the mixed format dissertation, the chapter are standalone article or standalone paper. So each of which has own introduction, its own literature review, the methodology. So it is a paper just like in the paper base. Only different is that it needs to be reconverted into a chapter. Now, for the mixed format dissertation, you need to follow a certain principle. And the basic principle starts from identifying the right sequence of the chapters to arrive at the final answer of the main research question. So you need to decide which paper will come first, which paper you will make the first chapter and the second one. And the order, the sequential order, it's not random because it must be chosen such a way that it helps you to answer your main research question. And the sequence of the chapter must stick to the topic and answer the research question. So again, if you decide to go for the mixed format, the same questions are raised before about being careful which topic to choose to work on applies. You cannot choose any random topic, but the topic must be aligned to your topic and with the goal to answer a specific research question that is connected to your main research question, right? You may also think of having some chapter that cannot be a paper in this type of framework. And you also have the possibility to combine some chapters to make it one good paper. It is allowed. But again, you need to be careful which journal to select. In the CBE, in South Africa, the Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET, makes available every year the list of accredited journals where scholars need to publish in. Although the list is not comprehensive enough, and sometimes may have some predatory journals, you need to at least stick to that. You must understand that if you publish in any accredited journal, but that is not GH accredited, it will not be accepted. So be careful to stick to that list. It is also understood that some accredited decent journal might turn into predatory journals. So the onus is on you, the student, also with the supervisor, to double check the journal where you want to send your work into. Because if you submit in a journal that is GH accredited in 1 year, but following the other year, it becomes predatory. And then after 2 years, you are submitting for your thesis for assessment, it might be tricky, So be careful. You need to exercise a lot of caution into selecting the journal where to send your work. What is written first, paper or chapters? As I said, in this type of format, even though chapters are standalone papers, you ought to decide whether you need to start writing the papers and then converting into a chapter or the other way around. In any case, you need to understand that the conversion will come with quite a number of things. In converting the chapter into article or vice versa, there are some sessions that need to be adjusted. You also kind of rework the flow, because if you are cutting down some output from, let's say, a chapter to make it a paper, then by cutting down some of the details, you might need to rework the flow. And then the change of formatting is likely. Remember, with the publications, the formatting does not depend on the author. The formatting depends on the journal. You ought to align your paper to the requirement, the formatting requirement of the journal. And that formatting requirement might not be consistent with what your university requires. And because of that, you then will be compelled to do the change in formatting. But whatever the case might be, you need to ensure the consistency by trying not to make article and chapter too different from each other. So when you are converting, after writing the papers, when you are converting them into the chapter, try to be as consistent as possible, because you will be assessed. The consistency in your work will be assessed. Now, when it comes to the benefit of the mixed format dissertations, as we have said before, it combines the advantages of the monograph as well as the advantages of the paper-based article. There is a reduction in the effort to later convert your work into article. Remember, when you are writing the monograph, it's just a full story. And then later on, you are compelled to extract the papers from that monograph. But by going mixed format dissertation ways, although you have registered as a monograph, then you don't have to extract the article anymore because your article are readily available. As I explained earlier, it also reduces the subjectivity bias because the short sequential argument that you have developed in each chapter help the examiner to follow the logic and reduce the subjectivity bias. So it reduces the chances of failing you unnecessarily. So it improves also the quality of the thesis. As we have indicated before, free feedback from the journal peer review helps you to adjust your thesis before submission, which means that it reduces the chance to have a lot of corrections when your thesis is sent out for assessment. You can also use the publication to get a job or a promotion. As a PhD student, mainly when you are doing the PhD, if you are already a staff member, you need promotion, you need the job, and the publication can give you to achieve this. If you want to do career in academia or in research, going through any paper-based format will help you because while writing PhD, you are actually gathering a lot of how do I call it, award or reward that could help.
I'm not sure what is going on, but I think we have lost Prof. Beatrice. Can anybody hear Prof?
Sorry, hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I lost the connection. Can you please
Okay.
help me to figure out where I was before I lost the connection? Sharing this screen now. All right. Okay. Can you view my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I guess I was here when I lost the connection.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, yeah, speaking to the benefits of the mixed format dissertation, we said that it reduces the effort to turn your monograph into articles or to extract article from your monograph later on. It also reduces the subjectivity bias. And then we said that the short papers that you have are the short sequential argument. If they were set to answer specific research questions that are connected to your main research question, it therefore helps the examiner to follow the logic and helps reduce the subjectivity bias, which is the likelihood to fail you unfairly. It also improves the quality of the thesis based on the feedback that you receive from the peer review and adjust. Then you have less correction to be made when your assessment report is back. You can also use the publication from your thesis to get the job or to get promotion. As it is the case in academia, article helps with promotion, helps for promotion, or for those who want to secure the a job in academia, or even a postdoctoral fellowship. Publications are key. They help you to achieve that. Hence, going for any format any paper-based dissertation, be it the mixed format or the paper-based, will be helpful. And you have some form of, reward. You get only the degree, you get not only the degree, but you also have publications at the end of your journey. Then the thesis submission. I'm not sure if there are any questions before I go for thesis submission. Any question? I just want to plug in my chart.
There are no questions on the chat. Okay, we have a hand up. Let me try to allow your mic. Yes, you can speak, Gerard.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Prof, for the really, really helpful presentation. Very, very clear and helpful. Just a question from me, and yeah, just to say that all the points you've made around the challenges of the paper model, I've experienced. I'm in my final year of a part-time PhD in the college, and yeah, I've really struggled with journals taking like forever to get back to me, but also with the unpredictability of that. So I'm working on a mixed format model. But the question I had was about so you mentioned the UJ policy about the requirement from the CBE of 2 manuscripts from the monograph before graduation. So does that mean that the manuscripts must have been submitted to a journal, or what is the specific requirement there? Is it that the supervisor kind of gives you an indication that those manuscripts are ready to be submitted? How does that get assessed? Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your question. When you go for a mixed format, you are tied to the expectation or the requirement of the monograph. That is the good side of it, which means that your papers need not to be published before you graduate. That is very important. But depending also on the school's requirement, because CBE, the moment your thesis has been registered as a monograph, then the requirement will be that you provide 2 publishable paper from your monograph before graduation. And that 2 publishable means they don't need to be accepted or published before you graduate. That's the good side of it. Now, the school requirement also ought to be followed. In the School of Economics, although the CBE will say that we want publishable paper, then depending on the program you are following, in the mainstream economics, you need to have those papers published. And believe it or not, when you are going for the mixed format, chances are that before you complete your PhD, you will have at least 1 publication. And then meeting the article requirement will not be a problem. So what we assess, to answer your question short, will be the proof of submission to the journal if you have registered as monograph. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I think that's clear. Maybe just one brief follow on from that. So the requirement is not that the paper is under review necessarily, it's more proof of submission.
Yeah, but the proof of submission means that the paper is under review, because from the moment you send your paper to the journal, the assumption is that it will be sent out for review. So it's under review.
Okay.
We can say it.
I mean, just again, very briefly. So the experiences that I've had is that you have journals have like 2 phases of assessing a paper. The first phase is like internal review by an editorial board, which can result in a desk rejection. And then on the basis of if the internal review is sort of positive, then it will be marked as under review, like officially, like in the double-blind peer review process. So just to say that that's been my experience, that there's this extra step, it seems, in journals that that somehow affects the criteria. So if it's sort of under review in the full blind peer review process, or if it's internally in review. But I think you've answered the question clearly.
Yeah, it's just the submission. We don't go into the internal process of the journal. The moment you have submitted the proof of submission, because that one is quick. When you submit your paper, there's always an acknowledgement that your paper has been submitted, and that is the proof that you have publishable paper, and that is all you need for the requirement, the monograph requirement. Okay. Any other question? Great. So I can continue.
We do have a hand up. Prof.
Sorry, please. I'm unable to see the hand because my screen is being shared. So please help me monitor. Manage the hands. Yeah. Next person.
Nena, you may unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So my question, I don't know if it was addressed because my network was off and on, around the public, there are two forms of thesis that you mentioned. The paper dissertation, I think that's what it's called. Is it possible to submit the papers to two different journals at the same time, just in case maybe one journal does not approve, or is it allowed that you submit that paper to maybe two different journals at the same time?
Okay. No, it is not allowed. It's an unethical behavior. Because the problem is, what if both accept? What will you do? So there is always a disclaimer when you are going through the paper submission process to confirm that the paper is submitted solely to that particular journal. So which means that if you take that you follow you accept that the paper was submitted only to that journal, later on to submit to another journal, is an unethical behavior, and then you can have serious consequences for that. So it is not allowed.
Okay.
One journal at a time. Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, just an add-on, and then that's it from me. When you submit your paper, assuming you submit your paper to a particular journal and it's rejected, can you submit that paper to another journal, or are there corrections that needs to be done? What happens if your paper is rejected by a particular journal?
Okay, good question. When the paper is rejected by one journal, you can either submit it immediately to another journal or attend to the comment, because there is always some comments, but not always. They are often comments that accompany the rejection. When it's rejected, which means that the editor, because the editor need to review the paper and see if it fits with the scope of the journal before they send out for review, for peer review. Sometimes at that stage, they can say, no, it doesn't fit our scope, and then the paper is rejected. There, you don't have any comment, which means that you need to just resend the paper to another journal.
Okay.
But if the paper gets through the review process with feedback, it is always advisable to make use of the feedback to improve your paper. Never miss the opportunity to improve your paper before you resend. But if you are, fighting with time, then you must be clever to just, send it through, hoping that you can get feedback and address all of them at the same time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well appreciated.
Okay, you're welcome. Next question, if there is any.
Yes, we do have from Hilma. You may unmute and speak.
Please go ahead. I'm listening.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Prof, for the presentation. It was very informative indeed. My question is around the paper-based dissertation. If I got you correctly, the maximum or the minimum number of paper that I'm required to submit are 3. That is the minimum. Are these all 3 supposed to be published by the time of submission? Or maybe I need a minimum of 2 published and maybe 1 under review. So I just want some clarity around that. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that question. I wanted to see if, yeah. So this is what you have. This, if I'm wondering if you are able to read, can you read it here? So the number of papers you have to provide in a paper-based dissertation varies from 2 to 5, depending on the university and the faculty. And as I explained, for CBE, you need a minimum of 2. 2 that is at least accepted. If you see the blue highlight, you need 2, a minimum of 2 accepted or published in a Q2 journal before graduation. That is the requirement. So this implies that you can well have written 4 papers, but if at least 2 of them are accepted or published, in the Q2 journal, then you have met the requirement. I'm not sure if this answers your question.
Thank you so much, Prof. It does. So then if I'm correct, then I would say that I can, for example, have 4 papers, 2 accepted and published, maybe 1 under review and 1 still to be submitted. So that can still qualify me to graduate.
Yes, definitely. You don't need published. You need at least, it can be accepted but not published, because there is a time between the acceptance and the publication. And so if those papers are at least accepted, that is fine, because acceptance means that there is no further changes on the paper. At least you can have minor changes like your editorial changes, but in terms of the content, you won't change the content. So accepted is fine. If they are published, that is ideal. But you also need to pay attention to the ranking of the journal where those papers need to be accepted, which means that it is also possible to have 2 published or accepted in the Q2 ranking and have another 1, 2 in the Q4. It will still be fine. The moment you have at least 2 in the Q2 journal, then the requirement is met.
Oh, thank you so much, Prof, for that information. So basically, I can have 2 in Q2 journal and 2 in other, maybe in Q3.
Yes, but provided that they are GHEAD accredited, you must also make sure, because you can have Q2 journal, but that journal, if that journal is not part of the GHEAD list of accredited journal, then you are in trouble. So always make sure you have, you consult that list of accredited journal before you make your decision to submit.
Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome. Any other question?
We had a hand from Sihle. You may go ahead, Sihle.
I'm good, thank you. I just wanted to get clarity on the papers, more especially for is this the monograph one? Whether it was 2 or 3, but I saw when you moved back your slides, that it was actually 2. So I'm sorted, thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, yeah. But for the monograph, you must remember that the monograph need not to be, the manuscript from the monograph need not to be published. They must be publishable. And how do you assess the quality, the publishable quality of the paper is just the submission. You need to show that you have submitted it to a journal for publication. That's all for the monograph.
And all of this must happen before the graduation date, or when do
Before.
you?
Mhm.
So I'm thinking, let's say you submit your thesis January, November, December. How will I'm assuming the examining people have access to see, Uti, how many you've submitted with this confirmation of a submission? Or is it something that you need to submit to confirm this? Sorry.
Oh, great. That is actually a good question. There is a time between the submission of your thesis and the graduation, right? So
Mhm.
the requirement we are talking about are the requirement for the graduation, for your result
Correct.
to be approved. So it is actually tricky when you submit while those requirements are not met. It means that upon submission, if you submit without meeting this requirement, and it happens that you don't secure the acceptance or the publication before your graduation, you won't be able to graduate. You will need to wait, unfortunately. That is why I'd encourage people to go for mixed format. Because for the mixed format dissertations, actually you register as a monograph. And the fact that you register as a monograph lessen your requirement in terms of the publication. You will need the submissions, the proof of submission for graduation rather than the proof of acceptance or proof of publication, which is a huge advantage. Secondly, you will be prepared. I mean, you are on the way to get not only your PhD, but to also get publications from your PhD. And this publication can help you for job. It can help you for promotion if you're a staff member and or any research position. It can also help those who want to apply for postdoctoral fellowship. That is why, rather than going to register your thesis as a paper base, with this kind of stringent kind of requirement, you may go for monograph. But when it comes to the writing, since you are free and you can decide how to lay out your dissertation, then you go for the standalone chapters as paper. And there it will help you to alleviate a lot of burden in terms of the requirement when you are done with your dissertation. That would be my advice. Any other question?
I think we have another question from Nena. You may speak, Nena.
Thank you very much, Prof. Just to find out who determines or how do you approach if you want to say that your paper is your publication or your thesis is paper-based dissertation, or it's mixed, or it's monogram. Is it that do you have to discuss that with your supervisor? Maybe I missed it, or do you just, I mean, assuming that maybe at the beginning, I mean, we're just having this, well, I'm hearing this for the first time around the different approaches. If I was doing a paper-based initially, assuming I was doing that and I haven't registered anything in that form, how do I change it? Or if I haven't registered that I'm doing a paper-based dissertation, how do I go about informing? Is it the supervisor? Is it the school? How does it work?
Oh, okay. Very good question. In terms of the choice, it is the university requirement, and I indicated in blue down there that a university actually, UJ, allows both types, which means the monograph as well as the article base, right? Now, when it comes to the CBE, you have different schools, and depending on the schools, they have their preferences. And you are right to say that uh, it is not clear who between the student and the supervisor should decide. So based on that, since those two are allowed, usually it is the decision of the supervisor together with the student. So you ought to have that conversation with your supervisor to find out which type of thesis you will go for. And if you are already registered, you might have read on your title registration, because when you are registering your title for the first time, there is always an option where you have to indicate whether the thesis is a monograph or an article base. And that title registration, obviously, it is usually filled in by the supervisor and the co-supervisor, but then students need to go through it. A student need to be informed about the type of thesis they will be writing. So if you have not been made aware of, if you did not have that conversation with your supervisor, I would advise you to check with your supervisor. Nowadays, CBE also have that communication line with the student. Previously, we did not have, but now students who are newly registered, they will always receive a confirmation from the college officer about the title that they have registered. And when you register your title, registration means that you will have decided the type of thesis. You will have submitted quite a number of documents, including the agreement, the supervision agreement, the ethical clearance certificates. There's quite a number of documents that comes with the title registration. So if you have registered your title, if you are not sure, about which type of thesis you have registered, you need to discuss with your supervisor. Now, the possibility of change, yes, it is possible to switch from one type to another type, but still that will be initiated by the supervisor. So they will go through a change, a topic, you call it change of topic, where it is not actually the topic that is being changed, but you want to switch from one type of dissertation to another one. There is a form that need to be filled in, and your supervisor knows that. So discuss with your supervisor. If you want to change, please go ahead.
Thank you very
Any
much,
other
Prof. Well
question?
answered. No, fine. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question?
Yes, we have a hand up from Gerard. You may go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Prof, thanks again. Just a further question about the mixed format approach or the mixed dissertation approach. So could you just walk back on the process? So in my in my case, to give you a bit of context, I've made a decision to move from the paper-based format just because of the challenges of working through journals, which is delaying me sort of unnecessarily. So I'm moving to a monograph format, but I've been working into the paper-based format model for the the sort of duration of my studies. Could you just walk back on that process in terms of the monograph structure and the chapters, the moving to chapters? Just so yeah, it would be really helpful just to get a little bit more there. Thanks.
Okay. So this is what I call mixed format, because there is no such thing as mixed format, right? When it comes to the format, you have two formal formats. The first one is the monograph, and the second one is the paper-based. Then, because of the inconveniences that we have discussed so far for both types, then I'm saying that in practice, this is what people will go for. They will go for the mixed format. And the mixed format, usually, it is registered as monograph. So don't get me wrong. It is a monograph. It is highlighted here. Now, in that monograph thing, since you want to follow a structure that looks like this, so you are basically writing papers, but then you want to put those papers into chapters. Hence, the process, what you call process, might be this, because you need to understand that how you order your chapters will matter, because you can't order them randomly. Well, because in the paper base, you can just put any paper, the order doesn't matter. As long as they are papers, they are stand alone and they are published, they are fine. As long as in the introduction, you are able to show the connection to a single topic, which is your topic, your dissertation topic, it is still fine. But then when you go to the mixed format, because mixed format is just like your monograph, but then you want to you decide to put the chapter like single, stand-alone papers. And because it is registered as a monograph, you wouldn't have the paper. So you can't copy the paper that are published and then paste there. You have to convert it into your chapters. And this is the principle. So you need to make sure that each of your papers are basically a subset of your research question. Remember, your topic, your thesis has got a main research question that can be broken down into sub-research questions. Make each of those sub-research questions the topic of your papers, so each chapters. So basically, you are saying that your structure will be set such a way that each sub-question is addressed in a single chapter. Then order those chapters nicely, because sometimes the research questions are set in a way that you ought to answer the first one before you get to the second one. Hence, in ordering, in choosing the a sequential order of your chapter, recall that and stick to that, because you need a full logic in a monograph from the introduction right through to the conclusion. So you need to pay attention to that. Now that you have papers that need to be converted into chapters, you need to write them as the chapters. And most of the time, the papers are shorter than the chapter, because in the papers, there are a lot of details that are not required. Hence, you decide to follow this setup, you need to understand that after writing the paper, you might be compelled, or you must be compelled, to extend that paper to make a chapter, so that you can provide as much detail as a thesis will require. I don't know if I've answered your question.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Very, very useful. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Then, any other question?
We do not have any other question. We may proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. So now we are talking about the thesis submission. Well, you are done with your thesis. Remember, everything starts with the supervisor, everything will end with the supervisor. So when you are done with your dissertation and then you are ready to submit, you need to do some kind of homework, although this is supposed to be the homework of your supervisor. But please double check so that the supervisor does not forget anything. There is so-called checklist, depending on the faculty, or on the school within the CBE, the process will be slightly different. For instance, there are some department schools that have the so-called intention to submit. So the intention to submit is a form. Is a form that the students sign together with the supervisor to the admin, the postgraduate admin of the school, to verify that they are ready for submission. Because you cannot submit, for instance, or your thesis will not be assessed if the external examiner have not been nominated. It is not the duty of the student, but your thesis cannot go out if that has not been done. Hence, with the intention to submit, the admin, the postgraduate admin of your department, of your school, will pull in the system, find out from the system if all the boxes have been ticked for you to submit. This also implies that the title of the supervisor have been registered or changed accordingly. Why is this important? Well, you might find awkward to say that how can we check whether the title or supervisor are registered at the end? Yes, because some people start with a title or a supervisor for some time, but down the line change the supervisor or the title. So before you submit, you need to make sure that what is registered, so the title that is in the system, together with the supervisor that are registered, supervisors that are registered in the system, are actually the final one. So you need to check this. Always ensure that that, because most of the time people will receive the email that no, but the title that you have on your test is different from the one that has been registered. So double check this. There's also the issue of ethical clearance. certificate or ethical clearance number. In the CBE, depending on the schools or the department, some people will have the ethical clearance number, others will have the ethical clearance certificate. Well, what is the difference between the two? First of all, you cannot start your dissertation if you don't have the ethical clearance. The ethical clearance, irrespective of the type of data that you use, you will need ethical clearance. For the primary data, which means the data that you collect on the field, you will need to go through an ethical process to find out if the way you intend to carry out your study, those you interviewed, and the questionnaire that you have set to be answered by the participant will actually meet the ethical requirement. So there is a process that you need to follow for that. And upon completion of the ethical clearance procedure, then you will be given a number or a certificate, depending on the school or the department. And that one will be helpful when you submit your thesis. Now, you might not need to collect the data on your own and make use of the existing data set. When you make use of the existing data set, what you need is the ethical exemption, right? And that ethical exemption, as I said, it will still depend on the school or the department. You can have the exemption certificate or the exemption number. So that it is important, because if you submit your document without this, then you will be asked to provide this document before they send it out. So make sure that you have the information about, you have something, either the certificate or the number, ethical clearance certificate or ethical clearance number. Now, you also need to have your dissertation it must be in Word and the PDF format. That is the submission. And beside all this, you need some supporting document. The supporting documents are some of the forms or some of the requirements that you need to meet. One of the form is the affidavit form. The affidavit form need to be stamped by a commissioner of oath. It is a document that in which the candidates confirm that what they have submitted is their own work. And this one need to be stamped. Commissioner of oath. Either you can go to the student center or to get it stamped, or you can take it to any police station to get it stamped. But you need any commissioner of oath to have it stamped. Then you have the declaration form. The declaration form need to be signed by student and the supervisor. It is the document that attests that the work that is being submitted was done by the student under the supervision of someone. So you need to have this one signed. Because UJ is very strict about plagiarism, you need to turn it in a report. For the turn it in the report, usually when you submit your document for turn it in, you have the full document. But what is important is the turning it report. Those are the pages that you find at the end of your turning in feedback. Many pages where you see the similarity score, and then the later pages where they break down the similarity report to give the type and the document where you have copied from. So those are the pages that are important, and you need to submit that. It is very also important for students to know that although it is possible with the AI to actually trick this turning in report to get something that is not a true reflection, there are many assessors that will resubmit your work into a turning in. And if there is a discrepancy between what you have submitted and what they got, you are in trouble. It is a straight fail. So you need to be careful, right? And then because English might not be, the first language of everyone, or because the writing skills is not obvious for everyone, since English is the language in which you have to submit your thesis, then you must prove that it has been proofread by a official language editor. And the letter that you obtain from that language editor is the one that you would use as a proof editing certificate. So those are the requirements. Check all this before you submit and make sure that you have agreed with your supervisor. Because if you do not agree, then this document, this one, will not be provided, and it is a problem. I know when you get close to the end of your PhD journey, because it's a stressful one, because you are tired, you might be tempted not to do a few things that the supervisor have said you must do, and they say, no, I just want to submit, I'm tired. But you have to, and for many reasons. If some of the most of the time, you might undermine what the supervisor is asking you to do at the last minute and think that no, but they are just too much. It's not required until you send your thesis out and then you are asked to resubmit. We will touch a little bit on that, but just take seriously every single thing that you are asked to do by your supervisor before submission, and ensure that you have all this document before you submit. So when this one is done, then you need to pay attention to the submission deadline. Know exactly when you have submitted before you proceed with the submission. Why is it important? In the CBE or at UJ, there are 2 submission deadlines per year. You have the first semester one, which is the 31st of May, and the second semester one, which is the 31st of October. How is this important? It is important because it determines somehow when to graduate. It determines somehow whether you can pay for the registration fees again or not. I will take an example for the second semester deadline. Imagine that you are close to submission, and then you submit not on the 31st of October, but you submit in November. Then you say, okay, but there's no difference between 31st of October and then November. Well, there is a huge difference. CBE is sitting with many departments, and the submission queue, because you submit online, by the way. Because you submit online, submission are sent out by queue. Once they receive your submission, when they get to your email, they check if all the boxes are ticked, and then they decide they need to send out. Now, imagine that you have submitted in November. When you submit in November, depending on the queue they have by the 31st of October, they might not be able to send out your work before they close in December. Hence, what implies is that if they have a lot of submission, and they will always have a lot of submission given the number of departments, they will focus on those that were submitted by the 31st and make it a priority to be sent out before they close in December. You see. Now, if yours is submitted in November, and then they don't manage to send it out before they close in December, your thesis will sit there until January, and then it will only be sent out in January. And when it is sent out in January, usually the assessor has 6 weeks to provide the feedback. Assuming that there is no issue, and then they are able to send the feedback after 6 weeks. From January, count 6 weeks, because when we're talking about January, usually they open second week of January. So from the second week of January, 6 weeks from there, you'll find yourself towards the end of February. Then end of February, that's where you receive the feedback. And then in March, that's when you will be doing the revision. And then for when you are doing the revision, this is actually March, when the college is doing the program for the graduation, the first graduation, you see. And if you miss the first semester graduation, it means that you can only graduate second semester. Hence, you have to pay the registration for the first semester. You need to understand this very well. Now, those who have submitted by the 31st and whose priority was given to their thesis to be sent out before the university closes in December, their thesis might have gone out, before January. And perhaps when they come in January, instead of sending out their thesis, they are now receiving their feedback. And those ones will be likely to graduate in first semester graduation. And because they are exiting the system first semester graduation, it means that they are not paying for the registration fees for that year. So this is very important. The same thing will apply to you, to those who meet this first semester deadline. The same reasoning will apply. So these deadlines are very important. Plan accordingly. Now, when we say plan accordingly, don't try to submit your work to the supervisor, the last part of your work to the supervisor on the, let's say on the 20th of October. And then you say, no, I want to meet the 31st October deadline. Really, when you submit to the supervisor on the 20th of October, you don't know what the supervisor has on his table, on her table. So you need to give yourself some time and allow some flexibility in terms of getting the feedback, be able to adjust before the 31st. So 31st of October, it is not the deadline where you submit your last piece of work to your supervisor, but it is the date where everything needs to be received at the faculty. Now, where do you submit and who make the submission? The submission is the responsibility of the student, and you submit online using this, email address. And it is always important to CC your supervisor. Why? For just in case, because if there is something that happened, then at least the supervisor can follow up. So, be careful about this one and about the deadline while making your submission. Submission outcome. Why do I have to talk about submission outcome when we are talking about submission process? Well, because there could be resubmission. And that's the only reason why I thought it would be important for you to know this, or to learn that you might be compelled to resubmit, and to learn exactly when you might be compelled to resubmit. So the minimum expected time, as I indicated earlier, is 6 weeks from the date the assessor receives the dissertation. It's not 6 weeks from the date you submit. Please don't get me wrong. This is 6 weeks from the date the assessor receives the dissertation. And it is also possible to have some delays. There are unforeseen circumstances. There could be lack of communication due to the change of address. Assessor can move from one university to another one, and then perhaps miss the communication from the old email address. This happen. So when you submit, please, while you know that, after 6 weeks, you might expect something, bear in mind that there could be possible delay. And delay because of things that we don't have control over, neither the faculty nor the assessor. So you also need to, make provision of those delays and plan accordingly, and be prepared to also pay some extra registration fees accordingly. The feedback also you must understand that the feedback is not communicated to you directly. It is communicated to the supervisor, right? So if you want to follow up with your supervisor, don't follow up with the faculty, right? Because the moment it is available, then the supervisor will receive the feedback. And the feedback is always communicated when all of them are received. There are 3 assessors for PhD and 2 assessors for masters. So part assessment report cannot be given. Why? Because one can fail you and then the other one pass you. You see? So if you receive the fail first and then you think that you have failed while the other one has not given his own report, then you might be grooming on a partial kind of feedback. So you won't even be able to receive partial feedback. It is when all of them are in that they will share with your supervisor. And know that there are 3 types of outcome. For the master dissertation, those outcomes come with the marks. They assign the marks to you. And based on the marks, you will know whether you have failed or not. With the PhD, given the introduction of the oral defense, now instead of accepted, they will say proceed, because if your assessment, the assessment of your written dissertation is not satisfactory, you cannot proceed. And what do you proceed with? You proceed with the oral defense. So for the dissertation, the written dissertation, you can have proceed unconditionally. So the external examiner can say that, okay, there is no condition. The work is done. I don't have any request for revision. Or they can ask you to make minor revision. When is minor revision? Usually it is done to the satisfaction of your supervisor. So that is fine. But this one, the light blue one, proceed after major revision. So they know that, the substance of your thesis can take you to PhD, but then there are major things that need to be done. And because of the nature of the revision, when it's major, you will have to resubmit. So you will revise and send back for assessment. And that will be a resubmission, which will follow the usual process of submission. The only difference is that some of the document might not be needed because you have them already, but they are new document that you will be provided, and I will discuss that. And the last outcome, the one that no one wants to have, is the fail, is when, you have a fail. Now, assuming that you have been asked to resubmit, usually students are given up to 3 months to resubmit the revised dissertation. So don't think that because you are asked to resubmit, you will sit for another year. This is 6 months. It's 3 months. Sometimes if they are issued, there will be a special, arrangement for you to go beyond this. But usually, on average, they expect you to resubmit within this time, right? And a similar process as first-time submission will be followed. But then, beside those documents that we spoke about, you need to have the revised thesis with track changes. Tracking your changes could be just highlighting whatever new information you have added to your thesis in a different colors. You don't have to make use of the track changes from the built-in track changes from the Word, right? You can't just use a different color. But in any case, whatever the case might be, you need to make sure that changes can be tracked. They can trace the change easily. Then the turning-in report of that revision. And remember, you might not plagiarize with your initial version of your thesis, but you plagiarize with the revision. So make sure that even when you are doing the revision, you don't plagiarize. You do the reference, you cite accordingly, and then when it comes to using other people's material, please don't copy and paste, write it in your own words. And then you have also the revision report. This document is very important. If you have gone through the revision process, the journals publication, you understand what the revision reports mean. It is a document that helps a reviewer to see what his comment was and how you have addressed it. So in the revision report, you basically have each comment and then the answer to that comment. It is important when you have this, it helps the reviewer to assess, to do the reassessment quickly. And the usual process will take place with the same outcome that you have. So when you submit your revision, it is not guaranteed that they will pass you. For the master dissertation, if they are happy, they will assign the mark, but that mark will be kept at 50%. So imagine, for instance, that initially you submitted your work and then you were given 40%. So this is a fail, right? Then after the resubmission, they give you, let's say, 68%. Okay, 68% means that they have passed you. But because you went through the supplementary kind of assessment, then your mark will be kept at 40. So this will tell the higher degree assessment that you now meet the requirement, but your true marks, your final mark for the dissertation will be 50%. For the PhD, since we don't assign marks, then they can either ask you to proceed with or without manual dissertation, or they can still fail you. There are people who are asked to revise, and then they will juggle around, not, be focused on the revision. They will overlook some of the requests of the assessor. And when that happens, be prepared. The assessor can get really angry and fail your study. So when you are given the opportunity to resubmit, please make sure that you do the right thing and confirm with your supervisor if what you did is acceptable, because as student, you might not know whether the revision is acceptable or not. Get the approval from your supervisor before you proceed to avoid this type of outcome. Okay. So finally, the submission process. From the intention to submit with the checklist and all the documents that we have listed, you need to hand in the dissertation using the channel that we have discussed, together with the supporting document. And then it will go to the evaluation. And from the examiner feedback, you might, be compelled to resubmit if you have a major revision to be made. And from there, you go back to the submission. So just to tell you that you can't submit more than once. This is about the submission process. Any question?
Prof, I'm just gonna read them one by one.
All right.
The first question is from John, and he says, in mixed method format, papers have to be published in DHET accredited journals, conferences, regardless of their ranking, Simango X Q2.
Sorry, say it again.
In mixed method format, papers have to be published in DHET accredited journals, conferences, regardless of their ranking, Simango Q2.
Yes, definitely. That is why I said that mixed format thesis is actually better, because you don't have that stringent requirement in terms of the rank of the journal, where the minimum of 2 publications are expected. So for the monograph, any monograph, proof of submission is fine. Publication in any journal that is GHET accredited is fine. And that publication can also be a book chapter. It can also be conference proceeding, provided that they are GHET accredited. Thank you.
Okay, another question from Gerard. Can Prof advise, if possible, where can the affidavit form and the declaration form be sourced or downloaded?
Okay, when you are ready for submission, usually your supervisor gives them to you.
Okay, thank you for that. And another question from John. What is acceptable percentage for plagiarism, especially on the monography?
Oh, okay. Well, that is a good question indeed. UJ has a requirement of less than 30%. Less than 30%. But you'll be surprised. I once sent a work out with 24%, and it was rejected for plagiarism. They just reject for plagiarism. So because of this, my bargain, I always ask the student, try to have less than 20%. But ideally, this is what I work for. I ask students not to cross 15%. A similarity score. That is my advice. So you can see this is the official one from UJ official one, less than 30%. But because of this experience, this is what I advise. And it also depends on the supervisor. Discuss with your supervisor to see if they have a different preference. Now, something that I also have to highlight when it comes to plagiarism is that when you go for paper-based or mixed format. It is possible to have more than this. Why? Because the moment your paper gets published, and then even if you have only the extended version, the converted version of that paper in your thesis as chapters, pulling the similarity index will come along with that. So they will pull that as a plagiarism. So always attach that explanation to your thesis. If you have published, you have made publication, don't be afraid when you see a high similarity index, because from the details, the similarity record comes with the details on which percentages come from where. They will give you the source. So when they indicate the source of the plagiarism from your published paper, then you need to take that one and explain and attach to your submission to make the examiner aware that publication from that work has been made, and that one has contributed to the high similarity score. Always do that. If you don't do that, they will pick it up as plagiarism, and then they will, grade you accordingly. Thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you, Prof. We have another comment from Tauna. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for an informative presentation. What is the UJ acceptable Turnitin percentage and standard words excluded by the Turnitin report? I think the first part of this question has been answered. I don't know if you want to touch on the words, standard words, Prof.
Standard words.
Yes,
Sorry,
it
I
says what
didn't
is the
get it.
UJ? It says what is the UJ acceptable Turnitin percentage and standard words excluded by the Turnitin report?
Oh, okay. In the Turnitin report, usually we don't include the references. So the reference section is excluded. I think most of the similarity check softwares, they don't take that into account because it would be too much. So they will, you usually turn it in from the abstract. Don't include the table of content, because it will pick it up as plagiarism sometimes. So includes from the first chapter to the last chapter, together with the abstract, and excluding the references. And even if you include the references, as I said, I think most of the time they will not take it into account. But to be on the safe side, when you turn it in, don't include the references.
Thank you, Prof. And another question, how many assessors examine PhD thesis, all locals or all international examiners?
Okay, for the PhD thesis, you have 3 external examiners, of which at least 1 international. However, depending on the nature of the topic, we might be compelled to have all of them local. I think they explained this. They say this one applies mostly to those who are in law studies, because externally it will be difficult to have people who are acquainted with our law and procedures. So there are specific exceptions depending on the topic where we can only use internal. When I say internal, I want to say local examiner. But most of the time, when it comes to the CBE, we make use of at least 1 international amongst the 3 assessors for PhD. Question answer or not? Please, if you are not happy with the answer, you can type again.
We'll wait for Tawana to know. Thank you to confirm. Okay, so we'll just proceed, and Another question from you says, in the case of a paper-based PhD thesis, how is the Turnitin report done? By paper or for the entire thesis?
Okay, if it's a paper-based thesis, I think that one should be straightforward. Remember, you copy the paper exactly the way they are, and I mean the way they are published, and then you put in your thesis. Hence, you have to turn it in, and then expectedly you can have turned in. You must have turned it in paper. Then later on, you have also the turning in of that binding test. We talked about binding test, right? Which is your main introduction and your main conclusion. So I think it will be up to you. Someone can have a similarity index per paper, or you can combine all of them. But in all the cases, you need to have less than the accepted score for the UG accepted score. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Clarity, I've taken note of your hand. I'm just gonna finish with the comment section and then I'll come to you. Thank you. So is asking, does CBE pay language editing for PhD thesis, and which office to contact at CBE?
Oh, okay. Unfortunately, no. It's part of your investment for your study. So the CBE does not. Yeah, you have to pay it yourself.
Okay,
you might speak to your supervisor. Sometimes supervisors are willing to help out. They can help out from their research fund. And if you are doing if you have scholarship for your thesis, I think they also make provision that you should be able to pay for this type of services from your scholarship.
Okay, thank you for that, Prof. So Clarity, you may unmute and speak.
All right.
Clarity, you may unmute yourself and speak.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was trying to unmute my mic. So I've got a couple of questions. There's this part that was asked about the number of words, and I'm not sure if Prof answered it well, because you know when you do your Tenet, it says that part where you said include quotes, exclude quotes, then bibliography, which is the one that she answered. Then there's a part where it says number of words. So you realize that from our previous colleges, some say 6, or you can edit to say probably 10 or 4. So I think that's where the question was. I'm not sure about the person who asked, but I would like to know on that part, as in how many words should we put on that part? So I'm not sure, Prof, if you
Yeah. Okay. You know, when your turning in background is different from ours. When I get to my turning in background, the only thing they ask me is whether I should include the reference or not. And
okay.
the number of words you are talking about, I don't think I see it from my background when I do the turning in. So I just exclude the reference, and then, yeah. And if you want to confirm, it is also good to do your own turning in and then perhaps ask your supervisor just to check, to do it, so that you can compare the similarity score, because the background are not the same. I don't know the number of words you are talking about. I actually don't have that. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I'm answered
Sorry
that
about
one.
that.
Then in terms of the quotes, does yours show to say if I put quotes in my thesis, should they be picked or they're not picked?
The
Like if I put to say someone said this, then I put quotes. I don't know if yours also shows that.
No, I don't
So
know.
I
don't
think
remember
we need to check with our supervisor. Okay? No,
Yeah, please.
It's fine.
Just to
Then,
compare, yeah.
okay. Then I just wanted some clarifications on the process that you said in terms of graduation. Let's say when we're in probably September now, and I need to graduate in the first graduation next semester. I have to make sure that I submit my thesis by 31 October, is it?
Yes.
So that I can qualify for the next graduation. Then if I submit by 31 May, it means I'll be going for the second graduation, is it?
Yes. If there are no unforeseen circumstances.
Yes.
Or
yes,
if there is no request for a submission, you see.
Oh, okay.
So that is what to expect if everything goes as planned.
Is planned. Okay. Then my second question is on the fees part. Let's say I submit my thesis for the next graduation by 31 September. It means I won't be paying the fees for next year. But if I submit by 31 May for the next graduation, it means that I'll be paying part of the money. So is it going to be half, or do I have to pay for the whole semester? How does it go about with regard to that one? Or it's just registration fee?
To be honest with you, I don't know, but I know that you have to pay for the fees. The fact that you submit by the 31st of October, it is not a guarantee that you will not pay. You might not pay it if everything goes as planned.
Wow.
You see, because if there is a delay in the submission, in the assessment feedback, then you will stay longer and then you miss the first semester graduation. And because of that, you will still be in the system to wait for the second one. And because you are in the system, you need to register and pay some fees. You see, so that is what I said.
Okay, so sorry, Prof. So this is despite my because I'm taking it from a point where I've done everything I can, and it's the university probably that is probably slowing down or whatever, facing the challenges.
No, it's not the university. It's not the university. It's the assessor.
The assessors, yeah. So yeah, I still have to pay no matter what.
Yeah, in the CBE, depending on the school, right? When we have students with this type of problems, usually we chip in to help out.
Okay.
Perhaps we can take each other part way, but not the full thing. And sometimes it might happen if there are no mini demands, then we can take it fully. But you need to at least be prepared to know that having submitted the 31st of October does not guarantee that the registration fees will be waived out. You can't have to pay for registration if, for instance, there is a delay in the feedback. And if there is a resubmission, then that time you won't say that it's the university, isn't it? Because the resubmission means that your work was not of good quality. There are things that need to be polished out. So that one, engage you also as a student. You are also responsible, and then you need to pay. Yeah. But if it's only the delay from the assessor, usually when you speak to your school or your department, if the funding is available, they will help out.
Okay. Or in the last question,
yes, please.
Everything goes well. My thesis has been submitted, and then the assessors have already provided the feedback. When do we do the Viva before graduation?
Okay, good question. The Viva comes after the submission. Usually, I think now they want to make it as quick as possible when there is no resubmission. Remember, you cannot be scheduled for Viva if there is a major revision, which means that you are compelled to resubmit. Okay. Now, assuming that you have unconditional acceptance or acceptance with minor revision, then you are expected, I think, within a month to do the Viva.
Okay.
Yeah. It also depends on the department and the school. So always ask your supervisor.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I answered well. Thank you for that.
Okay. Okay,
Sure.
you're welcome. Any other question?
Yes, we do have on the chat box.
right.
We also have thank you and appreciation messages coming through from Wondia and Kisaobaka. And Taona is asking, my question was answered. Thank you, Prof. May you kindly give us your email for further questions?
Okay.
And
there you go. You can copy.
okay, thank you for that, Prof. And we have another question from, Therese, and she's asking, thank you, Professor, for the informative session. I would like to ask if it is possible to register for PhD in 2025 if we submit the master's dissertation by 31st of October.
Okay. Then I don't know which which schools it's. Can I please ask? Can you please indicate which department or which school or which program you want to do?
Therese,
which program do you want to do?
I have allowed your mic. Please unmute and respond to Prof. While we're waiting for Therese to respond, I also have thank you messages from Sihle says thank you for all the information shared, and Denny says thank you, Prof, for this elaborate presentation. And that's all from the comment section. We'll just wait for Therese to respond, so we can end the session if there are no more questions.
Okay. All right. If that person is not able to unmute, what I can say is that the PhD process, the admission process varies across department. If in the School of Economics, you have to go through 2 phases. The first phase is the pre-screening, a phase which consists of having a pre-admission. The pre-admission is based on your marks for the master's as well as a pre-proposal. The pre-proposal is just the PhD idea, the topic idea you want to actually write your PhD on. So it's a couple of pages. It can be 2 to 3 pages where you present the idea you want to develop for your PhD. And after that pre-screening, if it's successful, you are given 6 months to develop the full proposal. And it's only upon successful defense, proposal defense, that you will be given the full admission. So this is what happens in the School of Economics. In other schools, I don't know, I wouldn't know. Perhaps you can talk to that school, or if you have identified a potential supervisor, you approach that supervisor to have detailed information on the PhD admission process. Would that be fine?
Okay, thank you. I think that will be fine. Thank you, Prof. We have a hand up from Fanuel. You may go ahead.
Okay. I'm waiting. Okay. Perhaps when I'm waiting, I've prepared only this. It's not part of our discussion, but I just put it just in case for people to know what they expect in the PhD defense. It's just a presentation of your work. It's just like a talk at a conference, but you need to expect a lot of questions. And in the CBE, the PhD defense, it's set just to establish the ownership of the work. So when you are preparing for the defense, ensure that you did it yourself, ensure you understand what you did, you understand the significance and the context of what you did. You prove your general understanding of the field of the thesis and ensure the committee understand what you did. And they also want to test your skills. This is just for people who want to go through this and know what to expect. It takes about 2 hours long, and it's typically preceded by a favorable feedback from your examiner. So you will not go through a oral defense if your dissertation has not received a pass, right? And the presentation section is usually public, is officially public, and the report of that defense need to be sent to the college higher degree committee, and after that they will compile it together with the feedback from the written dissertation, and that will go to the Senate higher degree committee. It is upon the approval from the Senate that the student will receive the decision. So after the defense would ask the supervisor, what is the decision? The supervisor has no final say. It will go through 2 committees, the college higher degree and then later on the Senate higher degree. And upon that, the final decision will be made, and that decision will be communicated to the student. Thank you. That's what I had to say about the oral defense.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I see some comments. Also, from Fanuel says, I have sent a question. I'm not sure, but we cannot see the question, but it's okay. And Therese says, is responding to the question that you asked. She says it is in the CBE for pre-proposal.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and then, of course, the recording will be made available. And also, I'm going to ask Prof to share the presentation with me so that I can share it with the attendees. Thank you. And also, a question from Amfa says, good day, Prof. Thank you so much for informative presentation. My question is that what could be the reason for rejecting of PhD application when you are still on your 2nd level of master's under CBE faculty? Thank you.
Okay, it is just the proposal. As I said, the PhD admission occurs in 2 phases, right? So the first rejection will be based on your master final marks. If you don't have, in the School of Economics, if you have less than 65%, then it will be problematic. But with less than 65%, if you are a UJ graduate, then you will be given the opportunity to register for a non-degree purpose, and then they will tell you exactly which subject you have to redo. And if you pass those subjects with the expected marks, then you will be able to be considered for PhD. Otherwise, if you come from another institution and then you have a marks of less than 65%, you will not be considered for a PhD program, at least in the School of Economics. So that is the first reason for PhD decline. Then the second one now is, once assuming that you meet the requirement, the entry requirement, and then you are given the opportunity to develop your full proposal. If your proposal defense is not successful, because you don't only defend the mark, you also mark the written proposal. So if the 2 are not successful, then that's the reason why you might be rejected. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you for that, Prof. We have another question from Clarity. What happens if you fail or don't perform well in Viva?
Okay, the Viva is not an assessment per se. It is only there to assess the ownership, to establish the ownership of the work, right? So today we have AI that helps you, ChatGPT that helps you to write, and then they add, a lot of temptation to get the thesis being written by someone else. So it is the opportunity to show that you know the work. And if you don't know the work, obviously you will be communicated accordingly. If it is established that you're not the owner of the work, obviously you don't deserve to be awarded a PhD. But if you show that, you demonstrate that you own the work, that's it. Before you get to that stage, they have assessed your written dissertation and pass it. So there is no way they can pass the dissertation there, the written dissertation, and fail the oral presentation. The oral presentation, as I say, it is not an assessment per se. It's just to establish that you are the owner of the work. And if you are not the owner, it means that the work is a good work, but you are not the owner, so you will not be given you will not be awarded the PhD. So that's what the oral defense is all about, at least at the CBE, because elsewhere it is part of the assessment process. Okay. I hope I answered that question. Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof. We do not have any other question on the chat, just thank you messages that are pouring in. And Nena says it was very informative. I'm fully equipped around the processes and requirements of passing my PhD degree. And thanks to you, Prof. And everybody's thanking you for an informative session and the information that you have shared. Yes, and also from the RCD, we would like to thank you very much, Prof, for honoring our invitation and also preparing and giving this very informative and insightful presentation. Thank you very much. And thank you to the attendees for taking your time and joining the session. I am aware that we have went above the time, but it was necessary, I think, so that all the questions could be answered and everybody to have the information, the right information. So thank you very much. I think we have the last question, Prof.
It's fine.
From Funwell.
Okay.
From Funwell, and it says, does UJ give a subsidy for conference presentation locally, regionally, and internationally?
Oh, okay. That is a good question. UJ, not UJ per se, but your department. Sometimes they make provision and help PhD student depending on how much funds are available. They can do that in our school. I mean, the School of Economics, we do that. And also speak to your supervisor, because sometimes supervisor, they have funding and then they can help out with. But if you make a request, then they might be able to support you. So that is what I can say about that. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you very much, Prof. And yes, we do not have any other question from the chat, and we don't have any hand that is up. So I think we will conclude the session now. And again, thank you so much, Prof, for this very insightful presentation. And of course, all the slides and the recording will be shared. And also, I'm not sure if everybody here is in our module community, but if you are not, you can send us an email on RCD inquiries, and then we will add you onto our module community, and you will be able to get information about the workshops that we host and the recordings and the slides, everything that is workshop related, we upload on our module community. So please make sure that you are part of our module community. Of course, I will share the email address on the chat. I'll write it on the chat. RCD inquiries at uj.ac.za. And also, may I please remind everyone to complete the survey that is on the chat. I'm going to post it again for the last time so we can get some insight on how you found this workshop for our record. So please, there is a link on the chat for the survey. Please, can we ask that you complete the survey? And if there are no more questions or comments, we can conclude our session. And thank you everyone for joining, and have a good day further.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all the attendees. Thank you for the nice word. Bye.
Thank you. May I please remind you, Prof, to please send me the presentation after this so that I can share it with everyone?
I will.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.